we promised last night, is on the subject of Seder Inspiration. Delight your guests, impress your family. And I've got a few thoughts that I'm looking forward to sharing with you tonight. So let's get right into it. Haggadah, the word Haggadah, of course, derives from the word lahagid, to tell, to relate, to recount. The main part of the Haggadah we mentioned actually last night as well is what's called Magid, which is the recounting the story, like the Torah says, V'higadata levincha. And the Medrash says that the word higadata, or the word lahagid, implies something which is joyful. A person like recounts or tells something which is he's excited about, he's interested in. Hopefully his listener is interested in it as well. The word lahagid connotes, it's associated with something that a person does with enthusiasm and with joy. So the word and the Haggadah itself should be experienced, should be related in a sense of joy. We have a famous teaching of the Sefer Charedim, Rabbi Eliezer Azkiri, who was a disciple in the close circle of the Ari, and he records there that the Ari himself related that in his view, every success and every achievement that he was able to accomplish in the service of God and in the understanding of the profound secrets of the Torah is the result of the fact that he always served God with joy, that he always derived extreme satisfaction and pleasure and joy and delight from the fulfillment of the mitzvot. And there's no greater mitzvah that brings joy to all of us than the Seder night. It's called Leil Shimurim, a night of protection, the night of redemption. It's the time when we recall our freedom, when we experience freedom. Like the Mishnah says, Afilu ani shabi Yisrael, even the most impoverished man in Israel, he reclines at the Seder night as if he's an aristocrat. And this is why we drink wine, and this is why we have all of the trappings of aristocracy and of freedom on the Seder night. The Haggadah itself includes so much which is an expression of appreciation of Hakaras Hatov, like we have Dayenu, the emphasis on Dayenu, Kama Ma'alos Tovos Lamokom Aleinu, how much beneficence has the Almighty bestowed upon us. The Dayenu sequence has 15 different stages. Actually, I think there's 16, but it repeats the refrain Dayenu. It would have been enough time after time, symbolizing the experience and the feeling that we have of gratitude and appreciation and joy that we are part of the Jewish people. And this, I would like to suggest, is reflected or is consistent with the opening salvo of the Seder, if you want to call it that. When we say, Halach ma'anya, this is the bread of affliction, and we hold up the matzah, and then we say, Kol dichvin yeseh v'yechol, Kol ditzvich yeseh v'yifsach. Whoever is hungry, let him come and eat. Whoever is in need, let him join us to partake of the Paschal lamb. But I just want to recall those words, the Aramaic words, Kol dichvin, whoever is hungry, yeseh v'yechol, let him come and eat. This is a call, this is an invitation to every Jew that is extended on the part of each householder. Whoever is hungry, let him come and eat. And this is a characteristic of the Jewish people and of Jewish life, the sense of responsibility for one another, but also the desire that we have to bestow kindness and goodness upon one another. And again, this all goes back to the appreciation that we have for the fact that we are part of Klal Yisrael. The very first chapter in the extended series of chapters on the laws of Pesach, this is the beginning of the 5th volume of Mishnah Berurah, which is normally published in 6 volumes. The first chapter is about the mitzvah of Kimcha de Pischa, of providing flour for Pesach, or Maos Chitin, providing for the needs of those who are without, in order to ensure, as we said a few minutes ago, that even one who is impoverished is able to celebrate Pesach with dignity and with joy. And as again, I say, this is a theme of the Haggadah, the appreciation, the gratitude, the joy. We sing for joy literally on the Seder night as we recall our redemption from Mitzrayim, which continues to animate and to vivify Jewish life generation after generation. There's a beautiful story about Rabbi Ezel Charif, one of the great rabbis. He was a rabbi in Slonim, and he was approached on the night before Pesach, B'dikas Chametz night, by a woman who was the wife of the greatest philanthropist in town. She approached him in great secrecy, and she said, I have to tell you that my husband has suffered some catastrophic business reversals, and in place of being able to give and to share generously, we ourselves are in need. But my husband's dignity will not allow him to come and to ask or to go door to door to say to his friends or erstwhile peers, I'm in need this year. He can't bring himself to do it. It will kill him. And yet we've got nothing. We do b'dikas chametz tonight. She said, there's no chametz to be found. There's no matzah to be found. There's no food to be found. How will we cope? What will we do? But I can't take any charity because it would be devastating for my husband. And the woman was in a completely devastated state. The rabbi said to her, I've got a plan. Tomorrow, when your husband comes to davening tomorrow evening, and he comes to wish me good Yom Tov, tell him to whisper in my ear something, whatever is on his mind, good Yom Tov or good wishes, whatever it may be, just as long as he whispers in my ear, let's see if that will help. Anyway, the woman was mystified. She told her husband, who was equally perplexed. Sure enough, on the night of Pesach, after the tefillah, the rabbi wished everyone a good Yom Tov, and is in accordance with the minhag. Every member of the community came to wish good Yom Tov to the Rav. And this man, who was known as a wealthy person, but who, as we said, was in fact impoverished and with nothing in his home, nothing to eat, even to celebrate the Chag, whispered to the rabbi, good Yom Tov, Rebbe. At that, the Rabbi Ezel Charif jumped up and he said, it's chametz. I'm sorry to say it's all chametz. It was evident to the onlookers that the man must have asked the rabbi some particular question, some event that had happened in their oven or the kitchen or something like that. And the rabbi ruled that unfortunately there was chametz. Whatever was cooked in the kitchen is chametz. So immediately when people heard that, did you hear what happened to the gvir of town, that he's got nothing to eat because it's all chametz. His food has become chametz. It's not kosher. So each person said, I'll bring you some chicken. I'll bring you some meat. I'll bring you some matzah. I've got wine. And everybody came, and everyone came the whole night. They brought food to the man. By the time they were done, he had enough food for the Seder night and indeed for the rest of Pesach. And in that way, he was able to preserve his dignity. And as these stories go, after the Chag, he was able to pursue further business opportunities, and his wealth was once again restored to him, and he was as charitable and as benevolent as ever he had been in the past. Okay, this is a story that reflects, the wisdom of the clever rabbi, but also the sense of responsibility that we have for one another. I mean, I did promise you some stories. I got another story along similar lines. It's said of Reb Chaim Brisker, and perhaps it's said of others as well, but it's known that the Briskers, the Soloveitchik family, were outstanding rabbinic geniuses such as the Jewish world has rarely seen the likes, and that dynasty continues to this day, incidentally. But also, they were distinguished for their love of their fellow man and for their extreme charitability, and Reb Chaim Brisker as well. They say that he was approached by a man who asked him, Rebbe, I want to know, when I have the Seder night, we have 4 cups of wine, can I fulfill that mitzvah with 4 cups of milk? Do I have to drink wine or can I drink milk? So the Rav thought for a short while, and he said to him, I'm not sure how he passed in the question. I can tell you what I would say, but that's not really the point of the story. Went into his study. He said, let me look into it. I need to research the matter. He came out with a bag of silver coins, and he said, this is my answer to your question. Take this, and with this, you'll have enough money for wine. So the man looked at the pouch, which had much more money than he required for wine, but he thanked the rabbi profusely and he left. The Rebbitzin said, Chaim, you're giving him away all of this money. Comes to ask you a question and you're giving him a fortune of money. For what? If you don't think he should use milk, then let him use wine. Give him money for 4 cups of wine. Can't cost that much for 4 cups of wine. Chaim Brisker, according to the story, said, look, if he's asking me whether he can use milk for the 4 cups of wine, obviously he doesn't have meat for the Seder night and he doesn't have chicken or any kind of poultry for the Seder night. And if he doesn't have for the Seder night, then what does he have for the rest of Yom Tov? Obviously, only the bare minimum, the basics. So obviously, I wanted to give him enough that he could celebrate Pesach in the way that we all do, with wine, with food, with meat, with fish. And maybe he could afford fish already. The fish and the milk could coexist at the Seder table. But the point, of course, was that he looked beyond the halachic query that the man was addressing and sought to provide for the man's needs in a further way, not just satisfy his halachic requirement for an answer to that question, and he provided for him in this way. I want to turn now to one of the most well-known passages in the Haggadah, near the beginning of the Haggadah. We did a bit of Halach Ma'anya, but let's talk now about the 4 sons. So the Haggadah says, Keneged Arba Banim Divrei Torah, one of the very well-known and fascinating passages in the Haggadah, the 4 sons. So there's the wise son, there's the wicked son, there's the usually rendered as the simple son, and the one who does not know how to ask, who may be just still a young child, maybe nursery school age or something of that sort. Again, one could speak about this one could devote a whole shiur to it. I want to share with you a thought and then a further thought on the Ben Rasha, who may be the most interesting of them all. So the Ben Rasha says, Ma avoda hazos lachem, what is this labor to you? And we respond, lachem velo lo. He says that he poses his question in a kind of insolent way. What is this effort for you? And he's implying that it's your problem and it's your interest and it's your endeavor to carry out this divine service. What's it all about? What's it for you? And the implication is, for you and not for me. He has rebelled, he has rejected the tradition of the Torah, and this is what the Haggadah says, lachem velo lo. It implies that he is, so to speak, challenging the father who is busy with the service of God, but he, the questioner, has discarded that. He's distanced himself from the Jewish people. He has denied the essence of the Torah. And you blunt his teeth. But the phrase that interests me here is lo haya nigal. If he had been there, he would not have been redeemed. In other words, the Haggadah turns it analyzes it and sort of thrusts it back at him. He says to the father in the imagery, what's this divine service for you? So we say to him, you're quite right. It is for us and not for you. If you had been in Egypt, lo haya nigal, you would not have been redeemed. You would not have been burdened with the mitzvah of the Korban Pesach. You would not have recalled and celebrated the redemption from Mitzrayim, because you would not have been redeemed from Mitzrayim. You would have stayed there and perished there. A very harsh response. So I saw in the name of Rav Chatzkel Abramsky. He was the Av Beis Din of the British Empire back in the day, from around 1935 to 1955, roughly. And Dayan Abramsky asked the following question. He said, how do we know with such confidence he would not have been redeemed? After all, the redemption took place on the night of Pesach with the death of the firstborn. The Egyptians rushed everybody out, hurried them out, encouraged them to leave, pleaded with them to leave, drove them out of Mitzrayim. Perhaps he would have been redeemed just because he would have gone with the flow. After all, why should he stay behind as a slave? And if you say, well, maybe he would have been among those villains who perished in the plague of darkness, but you can still ask yourself, okay, maybe he's wicked, but maybe he would have been impressed by all of those plagues, all of those supernatural events, finally pummeling the Egyptians, so to speak, turning the tables on them, realizing, fulfilling the divine promise that you will be redeemed. He may well have been quite impressed. Perhaps he was not the most devout or pious guy around, but if he had been there, perhaps he would have put aside his cynicism in the face of the miracles. Maybe all of those miracles would have convinced him. Says Rechatzkel Abramsky, actually, this is not the case. The Torah or the Haggadah is teaching us here that the nature of heresy is that miracles are unlikely to dislodge the heresy of the skeptic. The skepticism, the cynicism, the hyper-rationalism, maybe the self-interest of such a person will always prevail over the miracles, will deflect the miracles. And as in fact, the Rambam himself writes that even miracles that are actually impactful and impressive, after a while, the impact wanes. And it isn't long before a person reverts to form. The miracles alone would not have transformed him, would not have persuaded him, would not have caused him to join the Jewish people, that is to say, to identify with the people and leave Egypt together with the rest of the Klal Yisrael. How do we know? Says Rechatzkel Abramsky, because the reality is the Torah records that even the Jewish people who did experience the miracles and who did leave, they were still very skeptical. On the Yam Suf, at the Sea of Reeds, they said to Moshe, he said, for want of graves in Egypt, you took us to die here in the wilderness. I mean, wouldn't they be prepared to give Moshe a bit of credit, to give Moshe a bit of, benefit of the doubt after all of those miracles? Evidently not. Even once they crossed the Red Sea and all of those miracles as well, we find that it wasn't long before they were doubting God, complaining about the menu, the lack of food, and the like. Says Rechatzkel Abramsky, you know when it changed? And not that it was, let's say, universal change, because there was some recidivism after that as well. But the primary event which sustains the Jewish people until this day is receiving the Torah. Once the Jewish people received the Torah, the bulk of the people did believe, and they did embrace, and they did accept, and they did keep the mitzvah of Korban Pesach, and they did keep Pesach year by year until this very day. What's the difference? It's the Matan Torah, it's the relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with the Almighty, through receiving the Torah. That is why we can say about this Rosh Elohia Nigal, because the miracles would not have persuaded him. He would have reverted to form quickly enough. And as we see, even the Jewish people themselves, it's only after Matan Torah, it's only the relationship with the God of Israel through the Torah that has enabled us to maintain our faith and our belief throughout the generations. I would like now to share a different perspective on this Ben Rasha. Another observation, which I know I've said it many times, it's so evident, so apparent to the reader, but in my simplicity, I hadn't noticed it before, or hadn't recognized the novelty of it. Lo haya nigal, afata shinov, and we said to him, and we say not to him, but about him, lo haya nigal. If he had been, he would not have been redeemed. In other words, we don't speak to him, we speak of him. It is evident that the Ben Rasha, although many have pointed out, he comes to the Seder, we include him, we are grateful for him, we have to embrace him, and I'm not disputing any of that, but it is noteworthy that the response is not a direct response to him, but it's a response about him. We say lo haya nigal, we don't say ata lo hayita nigal, we say lo haya nigal in the third person. I saw in a lovely Haggadah of Yankel Galinsky. It's called Vihigadata. He was a great Maggid. He died about 10 years ago. He was little. He was about maybe 4'6", something like that. He was definitely under 5 foot. He was really short, but he was a man of great stature, and he parlayed his diminutive stature to great effect. He was a Maggid. He was an orator, almost an entertainer, but he was a great scholar, great Talmid Chacham as well. And he had so many stories of recollections of his own interaction with great Torah figures of previous generations. He said he once met the Panovizh Rav. He knew the Panovizh Rav very well, and the Panovizh Rav asked him a question. He said, it says in Pirkei Avos, Arba Midos B'Holchei Beis HaMedrash. There are 4 categories of those who go to the Beis HaMedrash. There's the person who goes and he doesn't learn, but he goes. So he gets the schar, the reward for going at least. Then there's the one who doesn't go, but he learns. He learns at home. He learns in his own private Beis Medrash. He gets schar for what he does. He learns Torah, even though he doesn't go to the Beis HaMedrash. Then, of course, there's the one who goes to the Beis HaMedrash and he learns. He is a good example to others and he achieves greatness in Torah. He's the tzaddik. He's the chassid. That's great. Then there's one who doesn't go and he doesn't learn, and he's a rasha. In fact, the Panovizh Rav, why does the Mishnah introduce these 4 character types, the 4 prototypes, by saying there are 4 midos of those who go to the Beis HaMedrash? The last guy doesn't even go. He doesn't go and he doesn't learn. He doesn't have his arms and legs in the sugya, in the subject altogether. Why is he included in the rubric of the 4 possibilities of those who go to the Beis HaMedrash? He doesn't even go. So he answered in the following way. He said, let's say there's a yeshiva bachar, and he is learning, and he's been in yeshiva for a few years, and it's not going well for him. He's going through a down. He's down and out. He's maybe depressed, maybe he's frustrated, maybe he's not having great success in his progress, or perhaps he's expecting more of himself than he's capable of delivering. And he's beginning to think, is this really for me? He's down and out. And then he considers, you know what? If I leave, will things go well for me? Well, I know other boys, maybe friends from my hometown, maybe boys in the yeshiva who left, and now they're on the street. Are they happy? Are they satisfied? Are they successful? Are they fulfilled? No, they're wayward. They are have no sense of self-worth. They are not fulfilled in life in any way. So he says, you know what? Maybe things aren't going so well for me here, but maybe I need to apply myself more. Maybe perhaps I need to believe in myself more. Maybe I need to study an aspect of Torah which is more congenial to my qualities and my character. And he redoubles his effort and he thrives. The example that he calls to mind of those who don't learn and those who are, wayward, off the derech, as we like to say now, those people inspire him in his learning. So therefore, this one who doesn't go to learn at all, he is a rasha, but he still is included in those who go to the Beis HaMedrash because maybe he helps to inspire or maybe to instruct, maybe he provides an object lesson for those who do go to the Beis HaMedrash. Says Panovizh Rav, or rather says Rav Yankel Galinsky, this insight of the Panovizh Rav may help us understand about why we don't actually address the rasha. We talk about the rasha. The fact that the rasha would not have been redeemed, the fact that he has distanced himself from the Jewish people, that inspires the rest of us. So there's a message, again, following the imagery of the father and his sons. The wicked son, unfortunately, is incorrigible. And therefore, we don't really engage with him. We just say, you know what? If he had been there, he would not have been redeemed. He wouldn't have even been part of this avoda, as he himself says. What is his work for you? What's his divine service for you? So we talk about him and we say, don't be like him. Don't be left behind by the destiny of the Jewish people. Don't be left behind. Don't count yourself out. And Rav Galinsky relates this to a recollection that he had from years before. He said, I once was invited to give a lecture in some public place. Must have been a big event, must have been advertised widely. And he says, I went up to the lectern and before the lecture began, and I saw people coming in to hear the drasha. One fellow came in with long hair, with tattoos, maybe a bit of earrings, and he had a little kippah perched, maybe like the paper kind you can get at the kotel. It was obvious that the kippah was not part of his normal uniform. He came up to me, this fella, and he said, I'm a journalist from a certain newspaper. I think it was a major newspaper in Israel at the time. And he said, is it okay if I can attend, or can I interview some of the people who come to this lecture? I'm interested in what you're about, what they're about. So Rav Galinsky said, I told him, I'm a guest here just like you are. You've got to ask the organizer, the ones who have, sponsored the lecture. Anyway, he sat down. I gave the drasha, he says, and he was laughing with everybody. He was crying with everybody. He seemed to be participating, or at least, engaged in him. Fine. Afterwards, I saw he went up to someone to interview him. And he said, my friend, to this fellow, he said, excuse me, are you dati from your home? Are you, like we say today, FFB, from birth? So the fellow said, no, I'm a Baal Tshuva. So he says, really? You're a Baal Tshuva? He said, tell me, this journalist said to him, do you think that your portion in the next world will be greater than that of a boy, a bachur from Bnei Brak, who's grown up in the heartland of Torah intensity? So Rav Galinsky said, I thought to myself, if he had asked me, I would have said, yeah, probably it is greater, because it says the place that Balei Tshuva achieve, even the righteous cannot achieve. Said, I listened, and the fellow said, no, I don't think so. He said, I think that the boy from Bnei Brak, he'll get more reward in the next world than me. So the journalist said, why is that? This is what he said. He said, I wasn't religious when I was growing up. Went to school, I went to the army, I went to work. I saw my friends, what they're up to, the secular lifestyle, the vacuousness of it, the living a life in the Jewish state, but without any appreciation of Jewish destiny, of Jewish history, without a realization of what it means to be a Jew. And I realized that life is so empty. It's so vacuous. And for me, it was very appealing to become religious, and now I'm so grateful for it. Whereas the boy in Bnei Brak, he's never tasted the life on the secular streets. He hasn't gone to India to climb Kathmandu with all the other, IDF graduates. And he imagines, or he's tempted to fantasize what it's like in the discos of Tel Aviv and this sort of thing. And if he stays in the Torah world, then he gets a lot of credit. But for me, I know how empty it is. And therefore, I don't think that I deserve a great amount of credit. So Galinsky said, I wanted to, jump down from the podium and to embrace him for this response. So in a similar way, the Ben Rasha, we don't talk to him, but we talk about him. And in a way, he becomes an object lesson for the others who come to the Seder. This is a sharper perspective on the subject than what I normally present. It's now 8:30. I would like to ask your permission to go on just a few more minutes to share with you a couple of other ideas. I want to do a little bit like eclecticism tonight. One of the interesting, I would say, mysterious parts of the Seder is when we mention the 10 plagues, and with a spoon, or some use a finger, we spill out some of the wine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Before that, we also say dam, the pillar of smoke, etc. But after that, we say that Rabbi Yehuda would use a mnemonic to recall the 10 plagues. Not that it's so difficult to recall the sequence of 10 words. And he compressed it into an acronym, a mnemonic, Datzach Adash Bachab, and we spill out the wine for that as well. I saw the Chida, my friend from a few years ago. So he writes the following. He says that Yitzias Mitzrayim was in the merit of Moshe Rabbeinu. Of course, he was the catalyst. He was the redeemer. It doesn't mean that he did it through his own initiative. He was an emissary from Hashem. But it was the merit of Moshe, as we say, he was the catalyst. But it was also in the merit of Yosef. And this is because Yosef was able to resist the blandishments of the wife of Potiphar. And more broadly, he was able to maintain his probity and his devotion and his moral stature in Egypt, which is called Ervas Haaretz. It's the debauchery of Egypt was renowned, and he resisted that influence, and he raised a family that was worthy, Ephraim and Menashe. So it's in the merit, we say Hayam Ra'av Yanos, the sea saw and fled. It fled because of the Aron, the casket of Yosef. So it was in the merit of Moshe and Yosef. He says from the Gurei Ha'ari, the disciples of the Ari, that Moshe was also, he had the neshama of Yosef as well. Moshe Rabbeinu also included, he had the neshama of Yosef. It's like a Gilgul, like a reincarnation. Not exactly the same though, because Moshe believed had a different reincarnation, but he says he had the neshama of Yosef as well. Moshe plus Yosef is gematria 501. I don't need to do the math for you. You can work it out if you like. I did check it. Take my word for it, or don't take my word. Moshe plus Yosef is 501. Datzach Adash Ba'achav is gematria 501. So he says that it was in the merit of Moshe and Yosef that the 10 plagues rained down upon the Egyptians and the Jewish people were redeemed. He says, and this is hinted to in that critical pasuk, that the fulcrum of that pasuk, which represents the beginning of the redemption. V'gam ani shamati es na'akas b'nei Yisrael asher Mitzrayim ma'avidim osam. And I have also heard the cry of the Jewish people, asher Mitzrayim ma'avidim osam. And that is the, as I say, the turning point. That's the prelude, and that sets in motion the redemption. What's about that? What's that pasuk about? Asher Mitzrayim, Asher is gematria 501. But he says further, Na'akas b'nei Israel. The cry Na'akas is gematria Taf Kuf Aleph, Na'akas plus the Nun. So Taf Kuf Aleph, of course, is 501. And the Nun is the fact that Yetzias Mitzrayim is mentioned in the Torah 50 times. And he says it also corresponds to the 50 levels of wisdom, that was acquired by Moshe Rabbeinu. So he says, Na'akas, the Nun, the 50 times that Yetzias Mitzrayim is mentioned in the Torah, is hinted to in that letter, that word Na'akas, 50, and then the 501. So 501 emerges as like the magic number in the redemption from Mitzrayim. It's Moshe plus Yosef, and it's Datzach Adash Ba'achav 501. Asher Mitzrayim ma'avidim osam, which the Egyptians are oppressing them. I'd like to just mention one last thing, and then we'll conclude. My friend for the year, as some of you I think know, is Ksava Kabbalah. Normally on this Thursday night slot, we do Ksava Kabbalah. I'd like to share with you an idea that I saw in his writings. Matzah al shum ma. Why do we eat matzah? I'm not asking you, I'm recalling what it says in the Seder. It's one of the important paragraphs of the Seder, of the Haggadah. I say important because Rabbi Gamliel says whoever doesn't explain these three has not fulfilled the mitzvah. So of course we do fulfill the mitzvah, and we do talk about matzah, why we eat the matzah, and there we have the pasuk, V'lo yachlu lisma'ameya. They could not tarry. They rushed out of Mitzrayim. Of course, matzah is all about timeliness. It's all about rushing. It's about hurrying. When matzah is made, the actual baking process is done with the utmost precision, but with great haste as well, because we don't want it to linger so that it does not become chametz. So there's a well-known drash. It says, "Ushmartem es hamatzos." You shall guard the matzah from becoming chametz, and this is why we have what we know as shemura matzah. This is matzah which has been especially guarded. Not only the matzah itself, but the source of the matzah. The flour is guarded against any kind of contact with water or fermentation to forestall fermentation, and even the grain as well, and even the stalks of wheat are also guarded so that it shouldn't rain upon them. They're harvested a bit early for just that reason. Says the well-known drash, Rashi quotes it, "Ushmartem es hamatzos al tikrei matzos ele mitzvos." There's a equivalency between matzah, between the matzot and the mitzvot, because the word matzot can be read mitzvot as well. If you just add another vav, or even without the other vav, you can pronounce it mitzvot. So says Iksava Kabbalah, this is a drash. That's a play on words, matzot and mitzvot. Just as matzah, we love matzah, we guard matzah, we also guard the mitzvot. But he says something very clever. He says it's not only a completely fanciful drash, a fanciful like association, which does not bear any kind of linguistic validity. He says it's not the case. The word mitzvah comes from the word tzav. Tzav means commandment. We had it in the beginning of the parsha a few weeks ago. Tzav is b'nei Aharon v'amarta lehem. Tzav means command. Tzivui is a commandment. Mitzvah is a commandment. The word mitzvah derives from the word tzav. Now, tzav, a command, suggests something which is important, which at least the commander regards it as something which has to be achieved. And he says the word tzav derives from the word itza, aleph, yud, tzadi, hey. Itza means to urge. Atz, aleph, tzadi. It means to do something quickly, to urge in an urgent way. Urging someone to do something, that's the word itza. And of course, the word tzav is closely related. A command is something that has to be done. If you're in the army or if you're in any environment where you're trying to accomplish an important task and there's an instructor or there's someone who is in charge and he issues an instruction, a command, then people have to get to it. The nature of a command is it's something important and it may be something time sensitive. It suggests an urgency. He says matzah is the same way. The word matzah also is urgent and it has to be done quickly. It has to be done rapidly. It has to be done in a conscientious way, but not in a lackadaisical way, but in a way which you get to it promptly. And actually, this is very logical, really, if you think about it, because zrizus, doing something with alacrity, is associated with ahavas hamitzvos. If you love mitzvahs, then you do it quickly. You do it with love, with enthusiasm. Something that is either boring or unimportant or tedious or reluctant or painful or difficult, then you may or may not get around to it. And if you do it, you might do it, without a lot of care or attention. But if it's something that's important to you, you love it, you're enthusiastic about it, then you naturally do it quickly and attentively. So therefore he says that the essence of matzah, they could not carry. Or the matzah is like the mitzvahs. We don't tarry in doing mitzvahs. We do them with love, with devotion, with excitement, with enthusiasm, with appreciation, and with delight. And that takes us back to where we began our shiur tonight. Haggadah, we said, is about simcha, the simcha shel mitzvah, the joy of performing the mitzvahs and the appreciation, the gratitude to Hashem that He has chosen us, that we are part of the Jewish people. And I'd like to conclude with a reflection, a memory that Natan Sharansky, the famous refusnik, Israeli politician as well, we met him, Ruth and I met him a few years ago. We were at a kiddush of his granddaughter was born to him. And he spoke a few weeks ago at a Sheva Brachos, and I want to tell you what he said. I wasn't at the Sheva Brachos, that's what reported. He said, I grew up in Ukraine probably 70 years ago. And he said, I didn't know much about being Jewish. I knew very little. But I was Jewish. Some of my friends were Jewish. And we knew we were Jewish because we were stamped in our identity cards, Jid. And we knew that if you had that word in your car, in your identity papers, it meant you were discriminated against, you were reviled, you were hated. It meant that you were last in line for any benefit, first in line for any detriment. That's what it meant to us. He said there were people who endeavored to get it erased through bribery or any other way, to have it expunged from their records. He said, what a difference 40 years makes. Today, there are Ukrainians in the tens of thousands who are racing or massing or clamoring at the border of Poland or Slovakia or Hungary or Romania or even Moldova. And they all know that there's one word that you may have in your identity papers. And if you do, then you're in luck. If you have that one word, it means you'll be assisted. It means you'll be your crossing the border will be facilitated. And once you are on the other side, people will look after you. They'll care for you. They'll provide for you. You'll be assisted, and your life may be saved because you've got that same word, Jid, in your passport. He said how things have changed. That which was a mark of the pariah. I don't know if Jews are popular in Ukraine necessarily, but those who are Jewish are certainly glad to be in the current circumstances. So I would just like to say that the Haggadah is our time to relate, to recount, to rejoice, to appreciate, to recognize our how fortunate we are to be part of the Jewish people and to be part of the drama of Jewish destiny. And as we recall the redemption from 3,300 years ago, we look forward to the future redemption, maybe speedily in our time. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry we have gone over a bit, but it's shorter than our Pesach Seder. At least I hope it's giving you some material to contemplate. And the shiur, by the way, will be recorded. And if you want to hear it again, just if you want to.